Welcome to the fifth video of the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada's Election Focus Series. This video is on Canada-U.S.-China trilateral relations, the implications of U.S. and China trade tensions on Canada's foreign policy, and the importance of maintaining good relations with both countries for Canada. We hope you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Different Canadian governments have had different attitudes toward China and different attitudes towards East Asia as a whole. Probably the most proactive government we have had was the first Trudeau government, the government of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who actually normalized relations with the People's Republic of China. And then for the subsequent couple of decades, through the Mulroney years, for example, Canada was more and more active in the region and sitting at more and more tables.
We're all familiar with the Huawei situation, and we're familiar with the trade barriers to Canadian exports to China and so on and so forth. So we're all kind of aware of those. But the most troubling part of it is the apparent lack of communication at the significant level.
In many ways, Canada is caught between China and the United States, but we are not equally positioned between the two. The United States is by far the more important trading partner, by far the more important security partner.
Currently, China accounts for only about 5% of Canadian exports, and thus ranks well behind the United States and even the European Union as Canada's third most important market. However, for Western Canada and Canada's commodity market sectors in particular, China is a critical market of outsized proportion.
Even with all of these tariffs and retaliation, the thought that U.S. companies are going to go back to the United States as a result of this, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think the same is the case for Canada. Particularly in the innovation and high-tech sector, that train has left the station, and I think Canada needs to be on board.
So Canada has an advantage in terms of having a well-honed trade analytical and negotiating capacity. We continue to be able to forge deals with important partners. The CETA with the European Union and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership are two shining examples. By contrast, the America First doctrine adopted by Trump has not translated into any significant progress on improving U.S. market access abroad.
My sense was that when I visited China this summer, that the Chinese side did not want the relationship to deteriorate further. Sino-American relationship is not just the main game in town, but perhaps even the only game in town, although everything hangs on what's going to happen in that relationship.
History shows that the battle for supremacy around the world is not the first time we're seeing it. It's happened almost a dozen times, if not more. And obviously, if you're number one, you're going to do everything you possibly can to slow down the rise of number two. And that's exactly what's going on between China and the US here.
Here, the big question is, what are the really important issues on which Ottawa and Washington really want to be on the same side? And to ascertain this, you have to talk to Americans. You have to maintain good relations and close relations with American counterparts, not just at the top.
From the United States, we see language coming out of the administration talking about the need for Canada to side with the United States against China, whether it's in terms of trade or whether it's in terms of Meng Wanzhou and the extradition request. That kind of pressure is going to build, in particular, as the United States looks abroad for allies in its continued kind of struggle with China.
The United States is really the elephant in the room when we talk about deteriorating Canada-China relations, because, of course, a lot of the issues, a lot of the diplomatic issues that Canada and China have at the present moment are directly related to the United States' tougher economic and foreign policy stance with respect to China.
The issue here is, to be blunt, you've got two elephants doing battle. And we're not one of them. It's Canada is really a passenger on this journey, if you will, and is observing from the outside looking in. And that would not be a bad strategy. Try and get out of the way when your two opponents or your two competitors or your two countries that are going to be really dominating the global economy are going at it. Don't get in the middle of it.
My number one piece of advice would be don't be scared of China. China is an important country. It's a big country. But at the end of the day, it can't really hurt us to the extent that I think Canadian policymakers tend to fear that they can. So we need to be willing to stand up for what's right. We need to be willing to stand up on principle, and we need to defend Canadian interests broadly construed, not just construed in an economic sense. In the short term, that probably means taking some economic heat from China.
Well, I think it's very important that during this period in which there seems to be an environment where globalization is on trial, trade agreements are on trial, and we're seeing a lot of angst around the world with pockets of explosions of strife, we need to make sure that we do everything we can to reassure Canadians that we stand by our being globalists, that we stand by being multilateralists, that we believe strongly that trade is an essential force for good.
Certainly the United States of today isn't the United States of 40 years ago. It is the United States which is much less committed to multilateralism, to the international rule of law. And so doubling down on that would actually mean going back on some of our basic principles.
The timeline for improved Canada-China relations is unfortunately tenuous and unclear at the moment. There are, of course, things that Canada and China could collaborate on. These include environmental protection, strengthening the multilateral trading system, and intellectual property protection and commercialization.
The challenge for Canada is to continue to train high school students, university students, but also government officials in what China is all about.